Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Biomed Device Center stage area. We're so glad to have you with us. Today, our keynote panel is on the topic of innovative product development in the move from hospital to home. And we have some tremendous panelists joining us today for this session. I think you'll be very pleased. For those of you standing around the edge, we are bringing a few more chairs to the stage area, so those should be here momentarily. So please come on and sit down when those arrive. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Kate Stevenson, who's the founding principal at Dyad Engineering. She's our panel moderator today. And if you'd please help me welcome Kate and the rest of our panelists.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I think we've hit noon. So yes, it is good afternoon. So I am here representing both my own company, Dyad Engineering, a consulting firm that I run here in medical device. But this panel is also being sponsored by MedTech Women. We are a nonprofit dedicated to supporting women in leadership in the medical technology space. And we were able to assemble an amazing panel of women from different MedTech companies right now to speak today. And I also wanted to say thank you to all the guests who showed up today, including those at SoCal High School who showed up, and San Jose Biomedical. This has been a blast, the last hour chatting with you guys and chatting with the panelists. So thank you for hanging out with us. So I'm just going to start off by letting our guests introduce themselves today. And so Archana, why don't you start off?
Yes, hi. Let's see. Can you hear me? Thank you for starting so I can do the mic testing for you. Yeah, so I'm Dr. Archana Dubey. I'm practicing physician by training and primary care physician. At AliveCore, I'm the chief clinical officer, and I lead their clinical product and strategy. AliveCore as a company is mission driven to bring cardiology in the hands of people when they're not in front of the doctors.
Hi, everyone. Yes, this is on. My name is Lauren Levinsky. I lead marketing at a company called Current Health. I really oversee everything for our US and UK markets. That includes our comms and brand, demand gen, and product marketing. I took over marketing from our CEO, Chris McCann, a little under 2 years ago when we were a Series A company. Since then, it's been a tremendous growth period, really seen a 10x in our customers, raised our Series B, and then in the last month, we're acquired by Best Buy as part of their health division. So I can definitely say more about what that means in digital health. It's very exciting. Prior to that, I've always been in digital health, working at a company called Kairos in both kind of on the implementation, boots on the ground side, and marketing for them.
Okay. Is this on? Okay. Hi, my name is Nicole Whitaker. I've been in the medical industry for 20 years in various areas, product development, marketing, and strategy. Worked in large organizations like GE and Philips, and also worked at smaller venture-backed private equity companies. I'm the lead strategic marketer at Echo. That includes everything from product marketing to brand communications, digital, and performance. Echo is a company based in Redwood City. It focuses on health information and devices, and our goal is to modernize medical imaging everywhere. And we recently had a big fundraise, so we've raised over $300 million to make that happen.
Hi, I'm Shayna Park. I am currently VP of R&D at a very small early stage clinical phase startup called Nisos. We are developing a non-pharmaceutical solution for disease states with root cause in inflammation. So some indications we're looking at treating are rheumatoid arthritis, migraine, postpartum depression, but all solutions that patients can use at home with no side effects. And I have responsibility for all of engineering, so R&D and manufacturing.
Awesome. So we have doctors, we have marketing, we have engineering, we have a lot of diverse experiences. And so this is a great opportunity for us to look kind of through multiple lenses at this whole idea of taking products that are jumping from in-clinic practices into home environments and just other environments outside of the standard way medicine's been done. And so I'd love to each of you just kind of summarize for your company's core offering, the product, what is it changing about medicine? How is it changing the way medicine was done, for AliveCore more than 10 years ago, because AliveCore is now becoming more standard of practice. But really, what was changing that your product came in and filled that need?
Yeah, so I have been practicing medicine for 25 years, and for the last 150 years, physicians and patients have seen a big old ECG machine in the office that uses a lot of stickers and has 12 leads. You have to disrobe, and it takes nearly 20 minutes to do a 12-lead ECG that gives you signal from the heart. Our founder, Dr. Dave Albert, didn't like that, and he is our inventor, so he created a non-sticky pad and a dry electrode that could detect the most common arrhythmia nearly 10 years ago, FDA-cleared, clinically validated device that you could stick in the back of your phone. And any individual, anywhere they are in the world, can now quickly figure out that they have atrial fibrillation or not at a clinical grade level. This has been the last 10 years when the journey of AliveCore started. And since then, we have been continuing to dig deeper and innovate so that we can bring intentionally an over-the-counter device in the hands of individuals so that we are proactive in early diagnoses and provide care as soon as possible. So in 2019, we launched a 6-lead device that is now in the hands of individuals. And we have 1.3 million users of our devices that are having and constantly getting diagnoses in their hands. And so you can share that with your doctor, your cardiologist, and get care at the point of diagnosis making. 60% of our device sales happen as a recommendation from a clinician. So we do have not only the patient endorsement, but also the physician's endorsement because they trust our device so much. So our 6 lead is FDA cleared and clinically validated. And then also, of course, our single lead is. And we are now being intentional, going from device into care. So now that we have seen the pandemic happen, most of us are wearing a mask, and possibly most of our patients are largely wanting to stay at home and doing virtual care. So AliveCore is now intentionally going into and have launched a cardiac care solution that allows people to get care when they are in the comfort of their home, or even if they have to work, they can get care from the comfort of their workplace. So we are taking devices and care in the hands of individuals.
Okay, so very literally taking in the clinic, in the home.
It is.
Lauren, how about you?
Yeah, so similarly, on the vein of wanting to provide more care in the home, Current Health sees ourselves as a care-at-home platform. And so this is a new concept. This isn't one of those categories you see in analyst websites. This is something that we really have seen as a huge need as organizations, our customers, our health systems, and pharma companies are looking to basically take everything they were doing in the hospital and move it into the home. And what we maybe started out 5 years ago as a remote patient monitoring company, we've now seen that remote patient monitoring, RPM, is really a component of what we do. So we have our own continuous wearable device. So we have a small biosensor that continuously monitors pulse rate, respiration rate, oxygen saturation, body temperature, and movement. But not every patient's going to need that. And so we also have this kind of device agnostic ecosystem where we'll integrate with devices like the Echo device to provide the appropriate care based on the clinical need of the patient. And our platform also brings in things like telemedicine, video visits, two-way communication, as well as patient reported outcomes to really tailor the at-home experience and provide a unified window into the patient's home for providers to really understand when they need to intervene and provide the appropriate care from home.
So you've got one product that's now expanding to a suite. Now you've got a platform that's pulling in all kinds of products. And so Lauren, how about you? Sorry, okay. Nicole, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I work at Echo, as I said. It's a health information and devices company, and we've got a big vision. We want to take medical imaging everywhere. And when you look at when our founders started out, they came out with the realization that 75% of the world does not have access to medical imaging. When you look at medical imaging today, what do you have? You've got CT, you've got MR, you've got X-ray, and then there's ultrasound. Ultrasound is a great imaging tool. It's non-invasive, it's non-ionizing, there's no radiation, and it can be highly portable. So what we did is we decided to take ultrasound. How do you take ultrasound to the masses? Well, the challenge today is ultrasound is very costly. So on one end, the high quality, big systems, costly, tens, hundreds, thousands of dollars, very complex to use, lots of buttons and knobs. And then on the other end, we've had advances in ultrasound, which has made it lower cost, but the image quality has suffered, and it's made it hard to, from an interoperability perspective. So we have a very simple vision. How do we bring affordable, high-quality healthcare to everyone so that they have 1,000 answers in their pocket wherever they go, from the hospital to the home to the clinic or on the go? Echo is building an ecosystem that includes a revolutionary handheld ultrasound device and cloud-based software for workflow, AI, and education. And our goal is similar. We want to put it in the hands of over 100 million clinicians so they have a very simple tool to provide a window into the body for better diagnosis, triaging, and treatment of disease at the point of care.
Okay, Shayna?
All right, so this is getting a little bit confusing because the reason I'm on this panel actually has less to do with my time at NISOS, which is only 3 months so far, and more to do with my tenure at iRhythm Technologies, where I helped kind of bring to fruition a cardiac monitoring service that's enabled by a wearable and has some commonality to what's happening at AliveCore in terms of monitoring EKG, but a little bit different in that it's about reaching a diagnosis for patients who may be experiencing intermittent symptoms. And so the standard of care before iRhythm came along was Holter monitoring or event monitoring, where it was ambulatory, the patient took it home, but it required a very high touch at the clinic. So the clinic was evaluating all of that EKG. There'd be cardiac techs that are looking through hours and hours of EKG. There would be techs that are refurbishing and cleaning these units to turn them back around. And the rate of diagnosis was also so poor that those patients would pop up again, and sometimes, in a worst case scenario, even pop up in the emergency department. So iRhythm's approach was really revolutionizing the approach to cardiac monitoring in that a long-term continuous monitor that gains very high patient compliance, is worn very comfortably, and then is also paired with really heavy-duty, kind of deep learning-enabled algorithms that evaluate the EKG at a level of accuracy that's mimicking cardiologists, so that we could deliver reports to the physician, and that, I like to think that the iRhythm solution has become the standard of care today, but certainly as of 12 years ago, the landscape looked very different.
Yeah. So, I love the fact that we have ultrasound, we have cardiology, we have multi-device platforms, but all of these, we're kind of an event here. We have a large number of suppliers, and so you see all the different pieces that are involved in your products. You have platform technologies, you have data management, you have hardware, you have software, you have usability challenges, and so probably all of you have multiple teams. And I guess for each one of your products, what did you really see was the main challenge? Or what was the team that kind of encountered some of the biggest challenges? Whether it was, sometimes we focus so much on the device. We say well, obviously that's the big challenge. Sometimes it's the software. Sometimes it's the privacy and security. So if any of you guys want to tell a story about what was one of the big gotchas that some of the people in the audience may not realize you ran into along the way to developing your products.
One of the things that was really important to AliveCore was we are very patient-centric. We call it our customer obsession that we have, and it was really, really important for us to be credible, trustworthy, build trust, and we could only build trust through clinical validation and FDA clearance. And so when you are in an inertia of industry in which you got legacy ECG or legacy monitoring and other things that clinicians are used to, how do you shift thinking on behalf and advocate for the patient to make things simpler, easier, and in the hands of the patient so that we can start really intervening at the time of diagnoses? Because if you think about, if you delay care because of delay in diagnoses, there is poor outcome, clinical outcomes that happen. People go to the emergency room or urgent cares, or maybe sadly even die. And then, of course, the cost of care is very high for the individual and also for the payer. So we do recognize that focusing on the patient was the most important thing. And how do we win their trust with a company that has an NPS of 66 and 1.3 million individuals who are getting their ECG data to us? Trust, security, clinical validation, FDA clearance was very important. And we understand the trifecta of healthcare. So there's a patient, and there's a provider, which is the clinician, and there's a payer. So we needed to be able to make sense for all three of them. So hence, we have a very acute focus on the providers because they write for our devices. And then on the top of it, reimbursement strategy. So just recently, nearly 6 months ago, we launched AliveCore Labs that is doing our monitoring, cardiac monitoring. So that is, clinicians ask for it, and we have delivered. And that does get reimbursed through the payer model. So, we are definitely in the swim lane of diagnostic at a clinician level. So our challenges were to get the FDA clearance. That was the most important, and it was the hardest thing to do because FDA needed to shift their mindset from an office-based diagnosis to the patient-based diagnosis.
So yeah, I mean, that whole usability of going from, okay, we have a doctor, they're managing this, we have trained techs doing every step of the process,
yes,
controlled environment, to
algorithmic-based diagnoses,
yeah,
which is FDA needed to embrace that, and that was the hardest hill that we had to climb.
Okay, so anybody else?
Yeah, I mean, I could counter with another story on the AI side, but I'll actually maybe just dive into some product engineering for fun. So one of the challenges at iRhythm that I think many mistook for something that would be relatively easy is adhering to skin for 2 weeks. I did in early days at iRhythm, so I was at iRhythm for 12 years. When we were a size not dissimilar from Nisos is today. And so we were learning a lot about the solution we were trying to implement. And in early days, I think some of the testing involved a adhesive only and patch only solution with no electronics. And when we started putting electronics on there, whoa, lo and behold, a sucker does not want to stick. And it's really funny because I'd have so many questions from people like, oh, well, what kind of adhesive do you use? And early days, we thought, okay, the adhesive is the secret sauce. But it turned out that it really had more to do with the mechanics of the device and what kinds of stresses it introduced to the adhesive skin interface than the adhesive itself. You certainly need a very effective adhesive and a very comfortable adhesive, but if you are applying a lot of stress to that adhesive, you're just not going to have much of a chance, particularly in patients that are very active and are perspiring or are in hot climates. And so we had a lot of fun figuring that out. And also some early adventures finding out about how some of the adhesion profile might change over shelf life. And so we learned our lessons early on that you don't want to skimp on accelerated aging, even when you're in a hurry.
So yeah, I love that, as an engineer, I like things to be simple. I like metal and plastic. Once you start throwing things like skin and muscle and fat and oil and grease, suddenly things get a lot more complicated. So I thank you for sharing the lessons learned. Those could have been fun. How you guys?
Yeah, so I think change management across the board has been kind of the biggest lesson learned for us. We are disease agnostic as well as kind of acuity agnostic. So we do deal with hypertension, chronic hypertension patients as they're trying to modify behavior. But on the higher acuity end of the spectrum, one of the bigger use cases for our platform is what's called hospital at home. So this wasn't too prevalent in the United States, but about a year ago, CMS passed a new waiver that basically allows for payment parity for health systems to provide inpatient level care in a home. So this means if a patient shows up, they have to be admitted from the emergency room or the hospital, but if they could be admitted to the hospital, if you meet certain criteria, you can send them home and treat them entirely in their own home. And that's where our platform comes into play, is that continuous monitoring of those patients. But a patient looks super different at home than they do in a hospital. Even if they are a pretty sick patient who's relatively sedentary, their data from a continuous monitoring device is going to be really dramatically different. And I think the change management of our customers who really want to obviously have high sensitivity around our device, how to balance that with the specificity to reduce the alarm burden of these patients at home, because you don't have eyes on them. You can't just check on them and say, oh, they're fine. You have to look into every single time an alarm goes off and really, provide them kind of that inpatient care. And so what can be really helpful to make sure that you are, acting only when there's a meaningful need to, is to add kind of these patient context clues around, what is their home environment like? What are specific parts of their condition that we need to keep in mind? What are their kind of reported symptoms? What is data saying from the spot monitoring that was done, an hour ago? And so I think the context and being able to drive that specificity is a really important balance. So we had, customers who wanted to alarm, after 2 seconds, but that's just a patient getting up to go to the bathroom. And so how do you make sure that you, are acknowledging when there is, need to have care? So I think that was a big change management piece of what our teams were actually doing. And then there's a whole set of things that they were not doing because they didn't need to when they were providing care in the hospital. So things like delivering devices, picking them up, cleaning them, refurbishing them. Things like providing in-home Wi-Fi and connectivity. I mean, that's a huge thing that you don't think twice about when you're delivering care in the hospital, but it's totally implausible to do it at home unless you've really thought through what that looks like. Ensuring things like access to water and having, safe living environments. I think all of those change management pieces are really, really critical when you're delivering care at home. And I think that's been what we've worked with our customers the most on, is ensuring that everything around our platform is taken care of so that they can do their job. And deliver excellent care.
Yeah, I could give an example, I guess, maybe moving to the software side of the house. One of the biggest challenges that is happening today in point-of-care ultrasound is their workflow challenge. It's very complex, it's very cumbersome. The ultrasound exams on the devices today have no connectivity back to the hospital systems for storage or for billing and the electronic medical records. So what we did was we looked at that, we looked at the technology today, and we decided to build our own software platform that pulls all of the ultrasound exams together in one place, and it's really easy to document and bill in seconds with a few taps on your phone. What we're finding is a couple things. I mean, one, it's cloud-based technology, and not all health systems are ready to adopt cloud-based technology. So we're in the process right now of working towards, making sure that we've got all the security certifications in place. We're working with really strong partners. So there's a certification to connect into the EMR. And we're trying to work with what we consider early adopters who have embraced that kind of technology today to get that moving. The other area around, I guess, change management as well is just getting people used to using the phone. I mean, you'll find a really interesting mix, Archie, you probably know this, of physicians, right? Some that are comfortable with using mobile applications and some that are not. We felt that it was important to build a mobile-first environment to make sure that it's super intuitive to use and you can do things quickly in seconds. And I think that's just going to be, over time, a change. We're definitely seeing the next generation of physicians really adopt that and appreciate that. I mean, you do everything on your mobile phone today. It is your communication tool, it's your photo book, it's your journal, it's your wallet. So kind of moving that mentality forward because that's going to give you the ability to do things fast and quickly on the go.
Yeah, so something's very common with every, anytime you have a new innovation, you're doing something new, it means you've got to train people how to do it. And especially when you're going, and every time the more the steps you change in a process, the more critical that education and training element is going to be. I mean, I know in traditional medical device, we have our sales reps, we have our training classes. What does training and education look like when you're moving it into the home environment? Whether it's training the doctors, training the patients, training your sales staff. If any of you can share lessons you've learned along that path or along those ways.
So over at, I guess we're following the
same. Sorry, Shana was about to speak too.
Oh, Shane, go ahead.
No, I was actually maybe just going to speak to a bit of a transition we had with COVID for iRhythm. So the traditional approach that we've taken at iRhythm is that when a patient presents with a symptom that may have a cardiac arrhythmia root cause, they're applied a patch in the clinic. They go home, they wear it for 2 weeks, and then they send it to iRhythm, where we take over, service kicks in, and a report goes to the physician. But with COVID, obviously, patients weren't comfortable going into the clinic anymore. And so we made a pretty big shift to home application of these devices. And it's incredible, like something that may be relatively simple for us when you're talking about a patient population where the median age is 65. You really have to be super thoughtful about how you're educating them, how you're training them, and how you're supporting them. And one of the things that we ended up doing was not only cranking up our customer support, where it was extremely hands-on, also sending them text messages saying, like, your device should have arrived, please call us for support, walking them through. But we also did a fair amount of user research and product design to modify that package and instructions so that it was really speaking to the patient in a way that they could understand, and maybe wasn't, you know, tailored more to the patient than what had previously been tailored to the clinician. Needs are completely different on that side.
And, you know, I would like to second that, because user research is part of AliveCore's DNA. So anytime we have built products, whether it's our single lead or 6-lead product, it has been coming from user research. And again, backing up from the patient experience was most important. So our devices are so simple to use that you could take them out of the box and start using them right away. That is patient-centric. We do not, I mean, even though there is all kinds of training and material is involved, but through our user research, we were able to see that without training material or using or reading those material, people could use this successfully for majority of patients. So that was very patient-centric. But then when we went to providers, we heard from them that they needed a platform for remote patient monitoring, so we built that. And then educating them around how to use it. And then, of course, now with IDTF monitoring, they wanted to be able to see in between, during the patient is being monitored, any kind of alerts that are coming through. So today, the standard is there is a patch that's put on the patient, it goes back to diagnostic, and then nobody knows what happened during that 2-week period of time. The IDTF monitoring that AliveCore offers is a result because the provider wanted to see what happened in 2 weeks period of time. So again, kind of backing up from the provider user research and then building our solutions, they're self-serve and rather easy to use. So I would urge all of you, if you do have a chance to go to alivecore.com, you could see the video how easy it is to use your 6-lead device to see 6 different types of arrhythmias that you could detect just today. So.
Okay, very cool.
Yeah, I was just going to build on what both Shana and Archana said. I mean, education is fundamental for us to drive the expansion and adoption of ultrasound to get better patient care. So we want to put ultrasound in the hands of people who've never used it before. So we're doing a couple things. One, we're investing in folks that we're bringing in-house. We've hired a physician to really lead our educational efforts. There's a renowned emergency medicine physician, an expert in the point-of-care space. We're doing the user research. We've built a growing network of clinical partners that we work with to develop and validate what we're putting to the table. And then we're looking at how we can also reinvent education. We want to have it in our software at the point of care. We're looking at how people are learning today. So we're looking at solutions like Noom and Duolingo, Masterclass. How are people using micro-learning and gamification to accelerate the learning and engagement? And then in addition to that, more longer term, we're looking at AI, right? How do you use AI to help people better capture that image and help them interpret that image to accelerate their learning faster? And our goal is to be just like, you know, what Archana was saying at AliveCore. We want ultrasound to be as easy as you would use your smartphone. You open it up, knows your user instructions. Taking an image is as simple as taking a picture on your camera. Achieving your workflow is just as simple as sending a text message. And that's our ultimate goal with education.
I'll just quickly, same points around patient education. I think one thing, because we do a lot of global clinical trials, so having to think through, on top of all these issues that are very pertinent, language barriers and cultural differences, and how does that impact a patient's adoption and adherence to your program?
You're absolutely right. So we are in 47 countries today, and language becomes really, really important for us to be communicating this. So I absolutely second that.
Okay.
So work on that.
So we have a few minutes left here. I've got more questions, but I also wanted to make sure the audience had a chance, if you have any questions that you would like to be able to ask our panelists. Okay. So I think this hand was up first. Here, we got a microphone.
So physician burnout is a major issue. It's a real issue. And another thing is like information overload on the patient side. It's like if you are giving too much information to the patient in a non-clinical environment, it also presents its own risks. So how you guys mitigate that? Because one of the major issues is like we have heard saying that when you give medical devices in a consumer end, they end up spamming their primary physicians. Mm-hmm. Well, look, I'm not feeling well, take a look at my ECG. So how do you address that issue?
So is that a question for a live core? Yes, of course, because we are sending all these ECGs to the doctors for the last 10 years, right? So we have utilized the power of AI to provide superpowers to our clinicians. So what used to happen before is that every ECG that you would do, as a clinician, you needed to know how to read it with clinical accuracy. And then if you don't know how to read it, if you're a primary care physician, then now you have to refer to a cardiologist to be able to read it. So that created a lot of access issues, the diagnoses delay issues. At this time, our AI determines the actual diagnosis by itself. So instead of a clinician needing to read each one of these ECG, a device reads it for them with clinical accuracy that FDA has cleared. And we have 160 peer-reviewed articles that have supported and has directed us and given us signal to keep moving in that direction. The second part is information overload. So we just had July 3rd of this year, 2021, we had a study that came out that actually showed cardiomobile 6L. When it is in the hands of individuals, we decreased the use of emergency room by 54%, hospitalization by 68%, and use of cardiac monitoring by 80%. And that's a huge reduction of anxiety, cost, and care outcome on behalf of the patient. So even though there is information, it's coming in that is actionable for the patient instead of causing more anxiety. Unlike other wearables in which it actually increased the emergency room visits because something happened and then they ran to the emergency room, we actually provided more comfort to them saying, hey, it is palpitation, but it's normal sinus rhythm. It is okay for you to recheck the ECG again. We are not advising, but the patient themselves are assuming their care, reaching out to the cardiologist who recommended this device and avoided a hospitalization emergency room and excess monitoring use. So we do feel that both the things are very important. We are a quadruple aim company. We are here to decrease physician burnout and also improve patient outcome.
Oh, actually, I think we had another question over in the back there.
Hi, thank you. My main question is, like, you talk about the global application of those devices. What happens if, like, you infiltrate a third world country that does not exactly have the best healthcare and insurance systems? How would you, like, provide a good telehealth and a good system to detect diagnoses without them, like, having enough resources to provide them the devices? They might have, like, a higher barrier and a lower income to purchase those devices.
Can you answer that one?
Yeah, sure. So actually, Current Health, we work in Uganda, in rural Uganda, in a clinic serving cesarean women who have had a cesarean section. And one thing, we've proven that our device and our whole platform can be used with this population, and post-cesarean allows them to kind of be monitored outside the clinic, have more bonding time with their child and better outcomes being monitored, not within the inpatient setting right there. One thing to your point, though, a lot of these devices require connectivity. And so I think, even in the US, that's the case. And we focus a lot on, even in the US, that digital divide. Who is accessing these types of healthcare at home solutions and who isn't because they don't have connectivity, they don't have a smartphone. And so part of our solution is very much providing those things both in the US as well as to those overseas locations. So in the case of Uganda, I mean, this was a forcing function for their hospital to install, Wi-Fi throughout their clinic, which has, a number of other benefits in addition to kind of how they were able to free up capacity for those beds for these specific women and monitor them remotely from within the clinic.
Cool. I think we had one more question down here. Sorry, I know we're down to just a couple last minutes here, and I want to make sure we try and get as many people as possible.
This is just a follow-up, I think, Arshana, you touched on it, in terms of I know you're kind of new technologies, but if you've done studies with ROI based on, patient health as well as reducing healthcare costs, have any of you done any studies like that that are published on your websites?
Yes, so these are independent studies. We did not fund them, and they are published in the journals, peer-reviewed journals. So I would... we do cite them on our website, so you can arrive there. Again, they're not funded by AliveCore, but I'm happy, arrive to our website, and you will be able to see the FISH study, a Mayo Clinic study. We have, several of the premier centers have studied AliveCore devices and KardioMobile 6L.
Very cool. You had a question up here? Got it. Up here in the front row.
While you're walking, I just wanted to share that we have partnered in developing countries with health systems, and it's the clinicians who are recommending. So there is care plugged into the device itself.
Hey, Kate, do you mind if I answer his question too?
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, from a low-cost perspective, one of the things that we're doing is we're building our ultrasound technology on proprietary technology. And the whole point of that is because today the low-cost systems mean low image quality. We want to help with health equity for companies like Uganda and others, so that is, they're getting exceptional imaging in their pocket at a really, really low cost. And there's no need for Wi-Fi in order to use it, but we want to make sure that it's extremely affordable so that we can deliver it to whether it's the developed or the developing countries.
Hi there. In kind of a follow-up to his question, I was just wondering about, you're talking about having health equity, but how can you be able to integrate these programs into a system such as the American health system while also providing an equitable system to those who don't have access to the current HMO system that America is up here?
So it's tension between, in many ways we have to make very specific decisions in the product that we developed to get that reimbursement.
Yes.
But at the same time, we don't want to end up purposely creating things that'll keep anybody who's not reimbursed on that system unable to use your product. So how do you manage that tension?
We started off as direct-to-consumer company, and that is bypassing all of the red tapeism of healthcare. Like, I'm a physician, I have very strong feelings. We can have coffee on the side, talking about how a health system doesn't work for everyone. And so direct-to-consumer already crosses through the social determinants of health and barriers. And we are shifting now from an individual, which is direct-to-consumer, to populations, making this part of a payer-covered or employer-covered solution through our population condition management solution. Because we also understand that a lot of people get care through coverage. And so we don't want to exclude the covered people either. So it is both, and we are going across all populations.
Yeah, I would say probably before COVID, it was very different reimbursement landscape. I think there's been so many allowances in the last year to make sure that health in the home is paid for. I think the CMS waiver I mentioned gives complete parity to care at home. And so I think because there's, it's proven now that you can provide just as effective and safe or more safe or safer care at home, I think there's going to be movements towards making those types of regulations permanent and hopefully even more inclusive, which would be really, really important. And I think the biggest thing here is our population is aging. We have more chronic conditions. Health systems know they don't have the capacity to care for everyone within their four walls. So I think that's going to be a driving force to figuring out how we can move more care into the home. And when you think about it like that, it becomes a strategic imperative alongside building a new wing of a hospital or staffing decisions. And I think that's when you're going to see hopefully more, this becomes something that they put on the table as a capacity, not just reimbursement, but more of a saving capacity issues.
Okay. Any other thoughts on that?
I mean, I was just going to, when you look at reimbursement, but it's also about, can these tools help better with earlier detection, earlier triaging, a first line of defense versus having to use more expensive cost of care, whether going into a clinic or using more expensive imaging in our case. So if there's ways that you can get the patient to the treatment that they need much earlier, there's a longer term cost savings versus just looking at reimbursement.
It does feel like the theme here between your question and the question earlier is that a key to access is also cost, right? So making sure that the solutions we're developing have a really keen eye on making sure we're keeping costs down, because only in keeping our costs down are we able to offer that at accessible pricing as well.
Okay, so I think we've got just the last couple of minutes. If each one of you guys are going to have you compress all of your experiences of decades here into some quick sound bites of advice for people who are looking at developing these devices, going into the home, what takeaways can you give them to think about based on your experience?
Yeah, I'd say number one is just to reiterate everything that was said here earlier, is you really have to understand your user. Yeah. Whether that is the end user of the patient or the clinician who's treating the patient, it's super easy to make assumptions. And so many times those assumptions can be proven wrong. And if you've gone through the effort of developing before you have that discovery, it's extremely costly and inefficient. So we've really found that sort of the secret weapon at iRhythm, and certainly something I'm bringing to NISOS, is to invest heavily in user research and iterative product design up front, so that whatever you're taking into development has already been vetted and you're pretty assured of your outcome.
Well, I couldn't have said that better, right? I'm spot on, Shana. And then, it's not just you think about what are really the jobs to be done for your end target audience, and then thinking about not just the product, but what is that entire customer experience, from how do they find you, how do they purchase, right? If you're starting to use things like e-commerce. How are you packaging? How are you onboarding your customers? And how are you providing just an overall ongoing customer experience and delighter? And so thinking about, not just, I think sometimes we get stuck in thinking about how the existing medical companies do it, but look at consumer brands, right? What do you love most? We're all consumers at heart, right? So what do you love most about your consumer brands? And can you bring those best practices into the adoption of your solutions?
Kind of on that vein, and maybe a controversial statement at a technology company, but I found that the tech is maybe 20% of the solution. I mean, you need to have great technology, it needs to do its job, but when it comes to fundamentally changing workflows and kind of turning the hospital or our current care system inside out and moving care into the home, I think the other 80% of the workflows and how it all fits into the larger system is something you really can't ignore if you're going to be successful.
Well, I would like to second all of your thoughts, but yeah, most important thing for any of the innovators here today, or if you work for a large company, is to make sure that you're adding value, not adding cost to the health system. So you're creating value, and especially for the 3 Ps in the pie, which is the patient, most importantly, and then the provider at the same time, and the payer. So having a clarity around how your solution is creating value for all the 3 partners in this health journey, and create a user story that you can stick to, and that's your North Star. If you're able to solve for that patient Jane Doe, and her or his life gets better, that is when you're successful. And while you're doing it, makes sense for the providers and the payers.
Right, awesome, all 4 of those. I am so glad we are recording this, because those are all amazing things to take away. So thank you guys so much for listening in. Laura, do you have some announcements for us?
Microphone. Just wanted to say thank you, everyone, for coming out today. Want to ask you to give our tremendous panel. A very nice round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you.